The air in the tavern was thick and heavy, filled with smoke from a dozen different worlds. Strange smells mixed together, some sweet, some bitter, some that made your nose burn. The trading station Kepler 7 was always busy, but at this hour, most creatures had gone to sleep. Only the night workers and the lost souls remained in places like this. Commander Vextel sat alone at the far end of the bar. His dark green skin looked almost black in the dim light. Old scars ran across his face and arms like pale lines on a map. His forearms moved slowly as he lifted a glass of green liquid to his mouth. The drink was thick and smelled like old plants, but it helped him forget things he wanted to forget. The Zephyrian veteran had been coming to this tavern every night for 2 months. He never talked to anyone. He just sat, drank, and stared at the wall behind the bar. Sometimes his mandibles would click together when he thought too hard about something. The sound was soft but sharp, like breaking twigs. Other aliens in the tavern knew who he was. Word traveled fast on a small station like this. They whispered that he had fought in the war against the humans. Some said he had been there when everything went wrong. Others said he had seen things that broke his mind. But no one dared to ask him directly. Tonight was different. A young Zephyrian female walked into the tavern. Her skin was lighter than Vextel's, and her movements were quick and nervous. She looked around the room until she spotted him. Then she walked over, her feet making soft clicking sounds on the metal floor. "Commander Vextel?" she asked. Her voice was high and uncertain. The old warrior looked up at her with tired eyes. "No one has called me commander in 3 years," he said. His voice was rough, like stones grinding together. "Who wants to know?" The young female sat down on the stool next to him without being invited. "My name is Crix. I work for the Galactic News Network. I write stories about the war." Vextel turned back to his drink. "The war is over. There are no more stories." "But there are," Crix said. She pulled out a small recording device and placed it on the bar between them. "No one talks about what really happened. The official reports say we lost because humans had better technology. But that's not true, is it?" The old commander's mandibles clicked faster. His forehands tightened around his glass. "You don't know what you're asking, young one?" "I know that every veteran I've tried to interview either won't talk or tells me the same lies the government puts out," Crix said. She leaned closer. "I know that something happened out there that scared our people so badly that we signed a peace treaty with a species we outnumbered 10 to 1. Vextel was quiet for a long time. He finished his drink and ordered another one from the bartender, who was a blob-like creature with too many eyes. The bartender slid another glass down the bar without making a sound. "You want to know about the humans?" Vextel finally asked. "You want to know why we lost?" "Yes," Crix said. "The people deserve to know the truth." Vextel laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "The truth. The truth is that we never fought the humans. We fought something else wearing human skin." He took a long drink and then looked at the recording device. "Turn that thing on if you want, but don't blame me for what you hear. And don't come crying to me when you can't sleep at night." Crix's hand shook slightly as she activated the recorder. The small device hummed softly, capturing every word. "It started 3 years ago," Vextel began. "The Empire had been expanding for 200 years. We had conquered 43 different species. Some fought hard, some gave up quickly, but they all followed the same pattern. They would resist, we would show them our strength, and then they would surrender." He paused to drink again. The green liquid seemed to give him the courage to continue. "The humans looked easy. Their technology was primitive compared to ours. They had no energy shields, no plasma weapons, no faster-than-light communication. They were stuck on a few dozen worlds, fighting among themselves like animals. Our intelligence said they would be the easiest conquest yet." Vextel's eyes grew distant as he remembered. "I was part of the first wave. We attacked a colony world called New Haven. It had maybe 50,000 humans on it. We brought a full battle fleet, 30 ships with enough firepower to crack a planet in half. The plan was simple," he continued. "Land our troops, demand surrender, and when they refused, We would destroy their major cities until they gave up. It had worked every time before. Crix listened without interrupting. She could see that talking about this was difficult for the old warrior. The humans did something no other species had ever done, Vextal said. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. They didn't surrender. They didn't even try to negotiate. They just started fighting. He finished his second drink and immediately ordered a third. You have to understand, when we conquered other species, the fighting usually lasted a few days, a week at most. The leaders would see they couldn't win and they would give up to save lives. But the humans, he shook his head. The humans acted like every single one of them was a warrior. Old ones, young ones, males, females, they all fought. They fought when they were outnumbered. They fought when they were surrounded. They fought when they had no weapons left. Vextal's mandibles were clicking rapidly now. I was with the ground forces that landed near their main city. We expected to meet their army at the landing zone. Instead, we found empty fields. For 6 hours, we marched toward the city, waiting for them to attack. Then the ground exploded. Under us, the old commander's forehands were shaking now. They had spent weeks digging tunnels under the whole area. Not just simple holes, complex networks with multiple levels and hidden chambers. When we reached the center of their trap, they set off explosives that had been buried for months. We lost half our landing force in the first minute, he said. The humans had predicted exactly where we would land and exactly which path we would take. They knew us better than we knew ourselves. Crix wanted to ask questions, but she could see that Vextal needed to tell this story in his own way, at his own pace. That was when I first saw him, Vextal continued. A human soldier named Jake Morrison. He came out of the smoke and fire like a demon from the old stories. He was covered in dirt and blood, carrying a weapon that looked like it was built from spare parts. Morrison looked right at me, right into my eyes, and I saw something there that I had never seen in any other species. Vextal paused, his voice barely audible. I saw that he was not afraid to die. More than that, I saw that he wanted to hurt us more than he wanted to live. The tavern had grown quiet around them. Even the other aliens seemed to sense that something important was being shared. That's when I knew, Vextal whispered. That's when I knew we had made a terrible mistake. We hadn't attacked a normal species. We had attacked something that evolution had turned into a living weapon. And now that weapon was pointed at us. Vextal ordered another drink. His hands were steadier now, but his eyes still held the haunted look of someone who had seen too much. Crix sat quietly, afraid that any sound might stop him from continuing his story. After the explosions, everything changed, Vextal said. We called for air support, but the humans had somehow jammed our communications. They were using our own technology against us, but we didn't understand how that was possible. He took a sip of his drink and continued. What was left of our landing? Force tried to regroup. We formed defensive positions and waited for the humans to attack again, but they didn't come. For hours we sat there waiting. Then the attack started, but not the way we expected. Vextal's mandibles clicked as he remembered. Single humans would appear, fire a few shots, and disappear. They hit us from different directions, never staying in one place long enough for us to fight back properly. The old warrior looked at Crix. You have to understand, we had fought many species before. When they attacked, they came in large groups. They fought like armies, with organization and clear battle plans. But the humans fought like individual predators. Oh, one of them was a female soldier named Lisa Hart, Vextal continued. She commanded their colonial defense forces, but she didn't fight like any commander we had ever seen. Instead of staying in a safe place and giving orders, she was right there with her soldiers, fighting beside them. Vextal paused to collect his thoughts. Hart had divided her forces into small groups. Each group knew exactly what to do without being told. They moved through the ruins of their own city like they had lived there their whole lives, which I suppose many of them had. We tried to corner one of these groups, he said. 20 of our soldiers surrounded 5 humans in a damaged building. We had them trapped, or so we thought. The old commander's voice grew quieter. The humans had prepared for this too. They had rigged their own buildings with explosives. When we entered the building, they brought the whole thing down on top of us. All 5 humans died, but they took 15 of our soldiers with them. Crix finally spoke. They killed themselves just to hurt you? That's what we thought at first, Vextal replied, but later we learned that those 5 humans had families hiding in the basement of that building. By bringing down the building, they created a tunnel that let their families escape while we were trapped in the rubble. They didn't kill themselves for revenge, he said. They killed themselves to save others, and they did it without hesitation. Vextal ordered another drink? The bartender was listening now too, his many eyes focused on the old warrior. The worst part was a human named Danny Price, Vextal continued. He was just a regular soldier, not even an officer. But he held a defensive position by himself for 6 hours while we threw everything we had at him. Price had set up in an old communication bunker on a hill overlooking our main camp. He had maybe 50 rounds of ammunition and some explosives he had made from mining equipment. That's all, the old commander shook his head. We sent wave after wave of soldiers at him. He would fire a few shots, force us to take cover, then move to a different position in the bunker. Every time we thought we had him cornered, he would appear somewhere else. For 6 hours, one human held up our entire ground operation, Vextal said. He used mirrors to make it look like there were more defenders. He threw rocks to make noise in empty rooms. He even used the bunker's old speaker system to make us think voices were coming from different places. Vextal's voice grew heavy with memory. When we finally overran the position, we found Price's body. He was still holding the detonator for the explosives he had planted throughout the bunker. Even in death, his finger was on the trigger. Around him were the bodies of 37 of our soldiers, he continued. 37 professional warriors killed by one human who probably learned to fight by hunting animals in the woods. Crix was writing notes on a small tablet, trying to keep up with the story. How did he kill so many? Price had turned the entire bunker into a trap, Vextal explained. He knew we would eventually break through, so he prepared for it. Hidden explosives, pitfall traps, even sharpened pieces of metal placed where soldiers would put their hands when climbing. But the most terrifying thing was what we found in his personal belongings, the old commander said. Price had written letters to his family. In them, he apologized for not being able to hold the position longer. He thought 6 hours wasn't enough. Vextal finished his drink in one gulp. That's when we started to understand what we were fighting. These humans didn't think like any other species we had encountered. They didn't fight to win. They fought to make us pay the highest price possible for every inch of ground. Then there was Amy Foster, he continued. She was an engineer, not even a soldier. But she did something that our top military scientists said was impossible. Foster somehow got access to our communication networks, Vextal said. Not just listening to our messages, but actually sending false orders to our ships in orbit. She convinced one of our cruisers that there was a malfunction in the orbital bombardment system. The cruiser's captain followed her false orders and fired on our own ground positions, he said. We lost 200 soldiers before we figured out what had happened. Crix looked up from her notes. How did she learn your language and military codes so quickly? That's what we wanted to know. Vextal replied. When we finally captured Foster, we expected to find some kind of advanced computer system or translation device. Instead, we found a young human female with a basic engineering degree who had learned our language by listening to our radio transmissions for 3 weeks. 3 weeks, he repeated. She learned enough of our language in 3 weeks to fool a starship captain. The tavern was now completely quiet except for Vextal's voice. Even the background music had stopped. During the interrogation, Foster told us something that still gives me nightmares, Vextal said. She said that humans had been fighting wars for thousands of years, not just against other species but against each other. They had developed tactics and strategies that we couldn't even imagine because we had never needed them. She said that Every human child learned about famous battles and great warriors from their history. They studied war the way other species studied art or science. Vextal's mandibles were clicking rapidly again. Foster explained that humans had written thousands of books about military strategy. They had schools that taught nothing but warfare. They had games that simulated combat. She told us that for humans, war wasn't just something that happened sometimes, he said. It was part of who they were. They had evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill them, so they became better at killing than anything else. That's... When we realized our mistake, Vextal continued, we thought we were conquering a primitive species. But we had actually attacked a race of natural-born warriors who had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of warfare. And now they were using all of that knowledge against us. The old commander looked directly at Crix. Do you understand what I'm telling you? We didn't lose because the humans were stronger or had better weapons. We lost because they were better at war than we could ever hope to be. And the worst part was that they were just getting started. The tavern had grown even quieter. Other aliens at nearby tables had stopped their conversations to listen. Vextal didn't seem to notice them. His focus was entirely on his memories and the green liquid in his glass. After New Haven, we thought the humans would retreat, Vextal said. Every other species we had conquered would pull back to their home worlds after losing a colony. They would try to negotiate or prepare for a siege, but the humans did something different. He paused to take another drink. They attacked us. Crix looked up from her notes. But you said they had primitive technology. How could they attack your fleet? That's what we thought too, Vextal replied. Our ships were faster, our weapons were stronger, our shields were better. On paper, the humans couldn't touch us. But humans don't fight on paper. The old commander's four hands moved as he spoke, as if he was still trying to grasp what had happened. 3 days after New Haven, human ships appeared in the Zeta system. They attacked our supply depot there, but they didn't fight like we expected. Normal space battles follow rules, he explained. Ships line up, exchange fire at long range, and the side with better technology wins, but the humans ignored all the rules. Vextal's voice grew more animated as he continued. They came at us in small groups, using asteroids and space debris for cover. Their ships were old and slow, but they moved in ways we had never seen before. They would appear, strike fast, and disappear before we could respond properly. Their leader was a pilot named Tony Martinez, he said. Martinez commanded a squadron of outdated fighters that should have been destroyed in the first few minutes of combat. Instead, he kept us busy for 8 hours. How? Crix asked. Martinez had studied our tactics, Vextal explained. He knew how our ships moved, how our weapons worked, how our pilots thought. He used that knowledge to predict what we would do before we did it. The old warrior shook his head in disbelief. Martinez would send one of his fighters on what looked like a suicide run at our main ship. While all our guns focused on that one fighter, the rest of his squadron would attack from a different direction. But the suicide fighter wouldn't actually die, he continued. At the last second, it would change course and escape while we were turning to face the real attack. Martinez did this over and over, making us waste ammunition and energy while his small force picked apart our formation. Vextal ordered another drink. The bartender moved more quietly now, not wanting to interrupt the story. The worst part was when Martinez started using civilian ships as weapons, Vextal said. There were dozens of human cargo ships in the system. We ignored them because they weren't military vessels. Martinez convinced the cargo ship captains to help him. They loaded their ships with explosives and metal debris, then flew them on collision courses with our larger vessels. Crix stopped writing. The civilians volunteered to die? Not die, Vextal corrected. Martinez had figured out a way to evacuate the crews at the last moment using small escape pods. The cargo ships would hit our shields and explode, creating massive debris fields that made it hard for us to see or move. While we were dealing with the explosions and debris, Martinez's fighters would attack our engines and weapon systems, he explained. He turned every civilian ship into a weapon without sacrificing the crew. The old commander's mandibles clicked as he remembered. In one battle, Martinez used an old mining ship filled with metal to destroy one of our cruisers. The mining ship was 100 years old and had no weapons, but when it hit our shields at full speed, the impact was like being hit by an asteroid. We started calling Martinez the Ghost because he seemed to appear and disappear at will, Vextal continued. Our pilots were afraid to engage him directly because he always had some trick we hadn't seen before. But Martinez wasn't the only one, he said. The humans had an admiral named Patricia Wells who commanded their main fleet. Wells did something that no alien commander had ever attempted. Vextal paused to collect his thoughts. Wells split her fleet into dozens of small groups and spread them across multiple star systems. Instead of keeping her ships together for protection, she scattered them like seeds in the wind. Each group had a specific target supply lines. Communication relays, fuel depots, repair stations, he explained. Wells attacked everything that kept our fleet operating, but never the fleet itself. It was brilliant, Vextal admitted reluctantly. Our ships were powerful, but they needed fuel, ammunition, and repairs. Wells made it impossible for us to get any of those things. She would send a small group of ships to attack a supply convoy, then disappear before our main fleet could respond. By the time we reached the attack site, her ships would be gone and another convoy would be under attack somewhere else. Crix was struggling to keep up with her notes. How many ships did Wells have? That's the terrifying part, Vextal replied. Wells had maybe 60 ships total, we had over 300. But she made it feel like human ships were everywhere at once. Wells used a tactic called asymmetric warfare, he continued. Instead of fighting our strengths, she attacked our weaknesses. She knew she couldn't win a direct battle, so she made sure we never had a direct battle. The old commander finished his drink and stared at the empty glass. But the humans had another weapon that was even more effective than their ships or their tactics. What was that? Crix asked. Information, Vextal said. The humans had a intelligence officer named Kevin Blake who did something impossible. He infiltrated one of our command ships and spent 3 months gathering our secrets. Blake disguised himself as a maintenance worker, he explained. For 3 months, he cleaned floors, fixed broken equipment, and emptied waste containers on our most secure vessel. And the whole time, he was copying our battle plans, troop movements, and communication codes. Vextal's voice grew quieter. Blake learned our language perfectly. He studied our culture and our military customs. He even learned to move and act like a Zephyrian worker. For 3 months, he walked among us, and no one suspected anything. How did you finally catch him? Crix asked. We didn't, Vextal replied. Blake completed his mission and escaped on his own. We only discovered his presence when human forces started attacking our positions with perfect timing and coordination. Blake had given the humans detailed information about our fleet positions, supply schedules, and command structure, he explained. Admiral Wells used that information to plan attacks that we couldn't defend against. The humans hit 3 supply depots, 2 communication stations, and a repair facility all at the same time, Vextal continued. Each attack happened exactly when our defenses were weakest. Blake had told them when our guard shifts changed and when our ships would be refueling. We lost 30 ships in 6 hours, he said. Not in glorious battle, but while they were sitting helpless in repair docks or waiting for fuel. The old warrior looked around the tavern. The other aliens were still listening, their faces showing a mixture of fear and fascination. That's when our high command finally understood what we were fighting, Vextal said. The humans weren't just defending their territory. They were waging a coordinated campaign to destroy our ability to make war. They had studied us, learned our weaknesses, and developed strategies specifically designed to defeat Zephyrian forces, he continued. Every tactic they used was chosen to counter something we did well. We were fighting an enemy that knew us better than we knew ourselves, Vextal concluded. And they were winning. Vextal's hands were shaking again. He had been drinking for hours now, but the alcohol didn't seem to dull the memories. If anything, it made them sharper and more painful. Crix noticed that other aliens in the tavern were moving closer, drawn by the terrible fascination of his story. The physical battles were bad enough, Vextel said. But then the humans started doing things that broke our minds. He ordered another drink, his fourth or fifth of the evening. There was a human commander named Ryan Cooper. Cooper didn't try to kill as many of our soldiers as possible. Instead, he tried to drive us insane. What do you mean? Crix asked. Cooper understood something about fear that we didn't, Vextel explained. He knew that a terrified soldier is worse than a dead soldier. A dead soldier is just gone. But a terrified soldier spreads fear to everyone around him. The old commander took a long drink before continuing. Cooper started what they called the Ghost Protocol. His soldiers would sneak into our camps at night, but they wouldn't attack anyone. They wouldn't attack? Crix repeated. No, Vextel said. They would just leave signs that they had been there. A human weapon placed next to a sleeping soldier's head. Food that had been poisoned but not eaten. Personal items that had been moved from one tent to another. His mandibles clicked rapidly as he remembered. In the morning, our soldiers would wake up and find these things. They would know that humans had been walking among them while they slept, close enough to kill them, but they had chosen not to. The psychological effect was devastating, he continued. Our soldiers stopped sleeping properly. They jumped at every sound. They started seeing humans in shadows that weren't there. Vextel's voice dropped to a whisper. Cooper had a specialist named Melissa Garcia who was perfect at this kind of warfare. Garcia could move through our camps like a ghost. She knew exactly how to terrorize without killing. Garcia would study our soldiers for days before making her move, he explained. She would learn their routines, their fears, their personal habits. Then she would use that knowledge to create perfect psychological attacks. The old warrior paused to steady his hands. I remember one incident where Garcia spent a week watching a supply sergeant named Kexvolume. Kexvolume was a good soldier, but he was afraid of the dark. He always checked his equipment 3 times before going to sleep. One night, Garcia snuck into Kexvol's tent and rearranged all his equipment, Vextel continued. She didn't steal anything or damage anything. She just moved everything exactly 6 inches to the left. When Kexvolume woke up and saw that his perfectly organized supplies had been moved, he broke down completely, he said. The idea that a human had been in his tent, touching his things while he slept, was too much for him to handle. Crix was writing quickly, trying to capture every detail. What happened to him? Kexvolume couldn't function as a soldier anymore, Vextel replied. He spent all his time checking and rechecking his equipment. He would wake up screaming from nightmares about humans in his tent. Eventually, we had to send him home. Garcia did this to dozens of our soldiers, he continued. Each attack was different, perfectly designed for the individual soldier. She turned our own minds against us. The old commander finished his drink and ordered another. But Garcia wasn't the worst part of Cooper's psychological warfare. The worst part was what they called the information campaign. Cooper had learned that Zephyrian soldiers communicated with their families back home, Vextel explained. Our families would send us letters and messages to keep our spirits up during the war. Cooper intercepted these communications and used them as weapons, he said. But not in the way you might think. He didn't threaten our families or send fake messages. Instead, he made sure our families knew exactly what was happening to us in the war. Vextel's voice became heavy with pain. Cooper would send detailed reports to our homeworlds about every battle, every defeat, every soldier who had been killed or captured. He made sure the families knew how badly we were losing. The families started sending us messages begging us to come home, he continued. Mothers writing to their sons asking why they were dying for a war that couldn't be won. Wives asking their husbands to desert rather than face the humans again. Cooper understood that homesick soldiers fight poorly, Vextel explained. He used our love for our families to weaken our will to fight. The tavern was now completely silent except for Vextel's voice. Even the bartender had stopped moving, his many eyes focused on the old warrior. Cooper also had an intelligence officer named Carl Stevens who specialized in misinformation, Vextel continued. Stevens would plant false information in our communication networks, making us believe things that weren't true. Stevens convinced several of our commanders that they were facing human forces much larger than they actually were. He explained. He would use fake radio transmissions, false sensor readings, and planted documents to make it seem like humans were everywhere. One commander received reports that suggested 50,000 human troops were advancing on his position, Vextel said. He retreated immediately, abandoning a strategic location without firing a shot. Later, we learned that Stevens had created those reports using nothing but fake radio chatter and some modified sensor equipment. The humans were actually only 300 soldiers, he added, but Stevens made them seem like an army. Vextel took another drink, his movements now slow and careful. But the most terrifying thing Cooper did was at a place called Titan Base. Our forces had surrounded a human outpost with 500 defenders. We cut off their supplies and communications. It should have been over in a week. The siege lasted 8 months, he said. X looked up from her notes. 8 months? How did they survive? That's what we wanted to know, Vextel replied. The base commander was a human named Nicole Adams. Adams somehow kept her soldiers fighting and functioning for 8 months without resupply. Adams had her soldiers eating recycled food paste and drinking purified urine, he continued. They were breathing recycled air and sleeping in shifts because they didn't have enough beds. But they never surrendered. Every few days Adams would send out small groups to attack our siege lines, Vextel explained. Not to break the siege, but to show us that her soldiers were still fighting, still dangerous. The attacks were always different, he said. Sometimes they would hit our supply lines. Sometimes they would target our communication equipment. Sometimes they would just fire a few shots and disappear to remind us they were still there. After 6 months, our soldiers started having nightmares about Titan Base, Vextel continued. They couldn't understand how the humans were still alive, let alone still fighting. Some of our soldiers started believing that humans couldn't actually die. The siege became a symbol of human stubbornness, he explained. News of it spread throughout our entire fleet. Soldiers who had never been to Titan Base started talking about it in whispers. When we finally overran the base, we found that Adams had kept detailed records of everything, Vextel said. She had documented every meal, every supply shortage, every casualty. She had treated the siege like a scientific experiment. In her final report, Adams wrote that the siege had been a success, he continued. Not because her soldiers had survived, but because they had tied up our forces for 8 months. 8 months that we couldn't use those soldiers anywhere else. Adams had sacrificed herself and her 500 soldiers to delay our entire campaign, Vextel concluded. And she had done it on purpose as part of a larger human strategy. The old commander looked directly at Crix. Do you understand what I'm telling you? The humans didn't just fight with weapons and ships. They fought with fear, information, and time itself. They turned everything into a weapon, including our own minds. By now, Vextel had lost count of how many drinks he had consumed. The green liquid had stained his mandibles, and his 4 hands moved slowly as he spoke. But his voice remained clear, as if the alcohol couldn't touch the memories that burned. In his mind, the war ended not with a great battle, but with a conversation, Vextel said. Our high command finally realized what every soldier in the field already knew. We couldn't win. Not against an enemy like this. He stared at the empty glass in front of him. The humans sent a single ship to our main fleet. No weapons, no escorts. Just one small vessel with a white flag painted on its hull. The ship carried a human ambassador named Peter Collins, Vextel continued. Collins came aboard our command vessel to discuss peace terms. I was there as part of the security detail. Crix looked up from her notes. What was he like? That's the thing that still haunts me, Vextel replied. Collins looked exactly like any other human. Medium height, brown hair, quiet voice. He could have been a farmer or a shopkeeper. But when he spoke, everyone in the room knew they were facing something dangerous. The old commander paused to order another drink. During the briefing before Collins arrived, our intelligence officers told us about his background. The humans had lost his entire family in our first attacks on New Haven, his wife, his 2 children, his parents, all dead in the orbital bombardment. We expected Collins to be angry, to want revenge, Vextel said. Instead, he was perfectly calm. He spoke to our admirals like he was discussing the weather. Collins laid out the peace terms in simple language, he continued. The Zephyrian Empire would withdraw from all human space. We would pay reparations for the damage we had caused. We would sign a non-aggression treaty that would last for 50 years. Vextel's mandibles clicked softly. Our admirals tried to negotiate. They pointed out that we still had more ships, more soldiers, more resources. Technically, we were still the stronger force. Collins listened politely, then asked if he could show us something, the old warrior said. He pulled out a small device and projected a star map on the conference table. The map showed the locations of human ships throughout Zephyrian space, Vextel explained. Not just the ships we knew about, but dozens of others that had been hiding for months. Human forces were positioned near every major Zephyrian world. Every important facility, every supply depot. Collins explained that if peace talks failed, those hidden ships would begin attacking Zephyrian civilian targets, he said. Not military bases or industrial facilities, but schools, hospitals, and residential areas. Crick stopped writing. The humans threatened to attack civilians? No, Vextel corrected. Collins never threatened anything. He simply explained what would happen if the war continued. He spoke about it like he was reading from a technical manual. Collins said that humans had studied our society and identified the targets that would cause maximum psychological damage with minimum effort. Vextel continued. They knew exactly which facilities to hit to cripple our economy and break our will to fight. But then Collins did something that none of us expected, he said. He offered to surrender. The tavern was now packed with aliens who had heard about the story and come to listen. They stood in complete silence, hanging on every word. Collins said that if we preferred, the humans would surrender unconditionally, Vextel explained. They would lay down their weapons and accept Zephyrian rule. All we had to do was promise to treat human civilians with the same consideration we showed our own people. Our admirals were confused, he continued. Why would Collins offer surrender one moment and threaten us the next? Collins explained that humans had 2 ways of being conquered, Vextel said. The easy way, where they submitted peacefully and became productive citizens of the Empire, or the hard way, where they fought until every last human was dead. He said the choice was ours, but we needed to understand what the hard way meant, the old commander continued. Collins told us that humans had been preparing for this war for their entire history, even before they knew aliens existed. Every human child learned about famous battles where outnumbered forces had defeated superior enemies, Vextel said. They had stories about small groups of warriors holding off entire armies. They celebrated defeats where soldiers died rather than surrender. Collins said that humans had been practicing for a war like this for thousands of years, he explained. They had fought each other so many times that warfare had become part of their nature. Then Collins showed us something else, Vextel continued. Video recordings from human training facilities. Thousands of humans, from children to elderly adults, learning military tactics and weapons training. Collins explained that every human settlement had been preparing for invasion since the war began, he said. They had built hidden bunkers, stockpiled weapons, and trained civilians to fight. If we conquered their worlds, we would face armed resistance for generations. Vextel finished his drink and pushed the glass away. But the most terrifying thing Collins told us was about human culture. He said that humans had a tradition of remembering their enemies, the old warrior explained. They wrote songs about wars that happened centuries ago. They built monuments to battles their ancestors had fought. They passed down stories of defeats. and victories through dozens of generations. Collins told us that if the war continued, humans would remember the Zephyrian Empire forever, he said. Our children and grandchildren would never be safe, because somewhere in human space someone would be planning revenge. He said that peace was not just better for humans, but better for us, Vextel continued, because humans who lived in peace might eventually forgive, but humans who had been conquered would never forget. The old commander looked around the packed tavern. During the negotiations, I was assigned to escort Collins to his quarters. I asked him how he could stay so calm when discussing the deaths of millions. Collins looked at me with those strange human eyes and said something I will never forget, Vextel said. He told me that calmness was the most dangerous thing about humans. He said that when humans were angry, they made mistakes, the old warrior explained. But when they were calm, they could plan for decades. They could wait for the perfect moment to strike. They could turn their enemies' strengths against them. Collins said that angry humans were dangerous for a few years, he continued. But calm humans were dangerous forever. Vextal stood up slowly, his movements careful and deliberate. The peace treaty was signed 3 days later. The Zephyrian Empire agreed to all human terms without further negotiation. But the real reason we agreed to peace wasn't because of their threats or their military capabilities, he said. We agreed because we finally understood what we were fighting. The humans weren't just another species to be conquered, Vextal explained. They were something evolution had created to survive in the worst possible conditions. They had spent thousands of years learning to fight, to endure, to never give up. We realized that even if we won every battle, even if we destroyed every human ship and occupied every human world, we would never truly defeat them, he said. Because humans don't just fight with weapons and ships. They fight with ideas and memories and dreams. They would have passed down the hatred for generations, Vextel concluded. Our great-grandchildren would have faced human rebels who remembered every injustice, every casualty, every broken promise. The old commander looked directly at Crix. The galaxy made a mistake when it attacked the humans. We thought they were weak because they fought among themselves. But fighting each other had made them stronger than any other species could imagine. Now they know we exist, he said. They know we can be beaten, and they know exactly how to do it. Vextel turned off the recording device and walked toward the door. Pray to whatever gods you worship that they never decide we're a threat again. As he left the tavern, the crowd of aliens remained silent, each one contemplating the terrible truth of what they had heard in the distance. News feeds showed reports of human exploration ships pushing deeper into unexplored space, and everyone wondered if Vextel's warning was already too late.